and welcome to African Voices TV. My name is Chiwe Chihana and I'm with my co-host Bailo Jalo.
Hello, good evening.
And thanks so much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the hostile environment and the Justice for Simba Ending the Hostile Environment campaign, which has just launched within the last hour here in Sheffield. In studio with us, we've got Simba Mujakachi. Hi, Victor.
Hi.
And we've also got Stuart Crosthwaite.
Hi, Chiwe.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us today. And Victor is the father to Simba, who this campaign is all about.
That's right.
Victor, could you tell us a bit about this particular situation?
Well, Simba is my second son. He's also a refugee asylum seeker like me. He's been in this country for the past 16 years. He came to England as a student dependent under my passport. So he's now 30 years old. So he came as a 14-year-old and has since been living in this country all that long. And then in June, he suffered a brain hemorrhagic stroke, which very nearly cost his life. And he was treated by the NHS, and I'm really full of praise in the manner in which the nursing and medical staff treated him, because they actually saved his life. It was a do or die thing. And in spite of all those efforts, what the medical staff did in saving his life, whilst he was in critical care unit, we started getting medical bills sent to Simba, to his partner's place, because he stays with his partner. And the medical bill that he received whilst he was in high dependence unit amounted to £993,000, which was a shock, particularly for somebody who was so critically ill and was trying to summon as much energy as possible for him to get better. And then he got this shocking medical bill.
So we're talking about £993,000 for somebody who is critically ill.
It's 93,000 actually, 93,000.
Under £100,000.
Under 100.
93,000.
Yeah. He had already incurred a medical bill of 7,000 before that.
Right.
When he underwent tests, and added to that, it all came to £100,000.
And we're talking about Simba, who is now 30 years old. And when did he come? How old was he when he came to the UK?
He was 14 when he came to England.
So he's been here since he was 14. So Stuart, what does SYMAAG do, and how are you particularly working on this particular campaign?
Well, SYMAAG stands for South Yorkshire Migration Asylum Action Group, and we're a campaigning group for refugee and migrant rights. And our members are from all over the world, including this country. So I guess we see what's happening in this country towards migrants and refugees as a consequence of a deliberate policy of the hostile environment that was announced in 2014 by Theresa May, although I think it started a long time before then under different governments.
Yeah.
And in essence, that is a policy which says we will stop migration or lower the number of people coming here by making life hard for people. And in practice, well, Victor's and his son are an example of what that means to people that we know and love. It's not a matter of it happening to somebody else, somewhere else. It's people that we know and love and are part of our community in Sheffield. So given it's a deliberate political policy, and we're a campaign organisation, obviously we want to challenge the policy and support those people who have been subjected to it. It's a policy which says if we make life hard in the country and if we build the walls high enough, then migration will stop. And it doesn't take any account of the reasons why people come here, fleeing from persecution and poverty.
Right.
Victor, you mentioned while Simba was in critical condition, that was the time all these bills were sent to Simba, to his partner. So you as a father, how has this affected you personally?
Well, it was quite a hammer blow because I would have expected some compassion. Here I was, as a parent, trying to deal with the situation. because before he went into surgery, we'd been told by the doctors to expect the worst. And we'd actually been told that he may not even last 1 hour into the surgery. That's how serious the situation was. I was standing just in the waiting room there with his partner, my elder son, and myself. And the three of us were actually on the edge of our seats, expecting to get the bad news within the hour of him getting into surgery. And when the surgery went on for 4¼ hours and it was successful, there was a kind of a sigh of relief, but he was still critically ill. And for the next 9 days, he was in a coma. And we are also expecting the worst. There was a time when his partner was told by the medical staff that it was on a Monday, I remember, when one of the doctors said his situation had gone down and he may not even last the night. And it's when you are in that situation and then you get these medical bills, he also, on top of that, he got a reminder from the Home Office because he's required, as per regulation, to periodically report at the Home Office. They send him a text message to say that he should come to report at the Home Office, despite the fact that we had submitted documentation to say that he was in intensive care unit. We sent a medical report with a very, very trusted friend of ours, who was a British national. We did that in order to try and extract some compassion from the system to say this guy is not even talking, he's not even aware of what is happening to him. But despite that, they sent a reminder. I've got the text message reminder to say that he should come and report, which was quite a shock. And what would you want? I mean, how would you react from a situation like that when you are dealing with a life and death situation and you get the system reacting to you in such a manner?
Total code in consideration.
Right. Yeah.
Given that he had received texts and you were receiving texts and reminders, it means that he very much has an active asylum claim at the time of this situation. What exactly is considered a situation where he's got an active asylum claim, so naturally he is legal within the system. He's legally recognized as part of the system. Stuart, how does that work? What's the policy against asylum seekers when it comes to accessing healthcare?
Well, it's that you're only allowed to access emergency healthcare, as I understand it. And what constitutes an emergency, well, that's up to people on the ground. So, for example, there's an Iranian Kurdish man about 10 years ago now in Sheffield. He was destitute, seeking asylum, an active asylum claim. Yeah. And he had an ulcer, a stomach ulcer, which was causing him a lot of pain. And he was destitute, sleeping in a garage in the winter. He went to Northern General Hospital to say, I've got this problem, I'm in extreme pain, can you treat me? He was turned down, he was told it's not an emergency. And he should come back when it becomes an emergency. So he should come back when his stomach ulcer bursts. So, from whichever way you look at it, in terms of humanitarian feelings or health economics, it's a crazy system. So emergency treatment's only for people. So you're waiting until problems become emergencies, or people are prevented from seeking care that they need because they're worried about getting charged or their data passed on. And people who might have contagious diseases, obviously, worried about going there. So these things have health consequences for the people involved and for all of us as well.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the campaign that's currently going on, Victor here, how is Simba doing now? And when did all this happen?
Well, he's been discharged from hospital, but he's starting to learn to walk because
that's good news then.
Yeah, it is good news, but it's going to be a long, drawn-out process towards recovery. This was somebody who suffered this stroke and got paralyzed. And we're talking about a person who's a qualified fitness trainer. He's got a fitness training certificate in there. He loves his football, so he's very good at football. And when you look at him now, he's a far cry from the Simba we knew was very, very active and sporty. So he's learning to walk. He can only walk a few meters, 1 or 2 meters, with the support of somebody. He's got no balance in himself at the moment. If he stands on his own, he simply collapses. So it's going to be a very, very long recovery process. And but like you say, it's a vast and remarkable improvement from what he was 6 months ago, because he was completely paralyzed. He couldn't even eat on his own. He had to be turned in bed, and he had to have all this care done to for him. But it is an improvement, but it's going to take him a very, very long time for him to get full recovery.
So I take it there's going to be a rehabilitation process, so naturally for him to recover his mobility. There's a further cost that's going to be associated with that gradually.
Yes, we're expecting more costs because when he went into surgery, they removed part of his skull on the left side because one of the vessels in his brain ruptured. So they to remove that part of the skull in order to repair the ruptured vessel and then stop the bleeding, which they did successfully. It was, like I said, a touch and go situation. And because that part of the skull is, well, they've thrown it into the bin, really. Right. He needs to go back into surgery again so that they repair it with artificial material in order to cover up. If you look at him now, his hair is grown back, but it's just skin that's covering his this side of the skull. So he needs to go back to a reconstructive surgery, and that's more bills. So that's the reason why this campaign has been launched, because the business side of the NHS is still billing him, whilst the medical side is looking after him. And then you say,
but talking of that, though, sorry to interrupt you there, is the NHS aware of his situation? Are they aware of him being an asylum seeker or a failed asylum seeker?
They know it, and the reason why he's being charged is because he's been categorized, put in a group which is known as overseas patient. He's categorized as an overseas patient. An overseas patient is somebody like a health tourist, somebody who's not entitled to have health care in this country.
Okay.
A thing that I hotly dispute.
Absolutely.
Because Simba has been here for 16 years, more than he has lived in Zimbabwe, which is our country of birth. And whilst I would want to appreciate why they put that category of health tourists are people who come on holiday visas, get treatment and go away. Simba hasn't been doing that. He hasn't been to Zimbabwe for the past 16 years. Why should he be categorized as a health tourist? And you were talking about Chiwa, about active asylum cases.
Yes.
His asylum case was sat on by the Home Office for 5 years until last year, from 2013 up to 2018, right up to the time when Zimbabwean refused asylum seekers were summoned to the reporting centers in the places that they are in. A week before that's when they sent him a refusal, 5 years after the further submissions was done.
Can I just ask something around the situation in Zimbabwe? Because we appreciate, actually, Zimbabwe is still not a place that people should be rushing to go back to. And you just highlighted a situation, I think that was last year, when we saw Zimbabweans being called to the Home Office, obviously the revival of that particular case you've talked about. Stuart, what happened during that time? Because word on the street is that there was a collusion between the Zimbabwean government and the British government, and obviously making things even more difficult for Zimbabweans who are seeking asylum here. What happened to their safety? What was going on? What's the story behind this?
Well, it's well documented. The British ambassador to Zimbabwe in 2018, a woman called Catriona Lang, made a deal with the Zimbabwean Deputy Prime Minister to deport 2,500 Zimbabwean people living in the UK. Now, we speculate as to what the reasons for that were. There's a number of possibilities, and I'd be interested to hear what Victor thinks about this. Possible trade deal, helping writing off Zimbabwe's large foreign debt, a part of it anyway. Perhaps reintroduction into the Commonwealth. So it's well known there was a quid pro quo, there's a deal going on there, where the Zimbabwean military dictatorship, because it still is, agreed to accept Zimbabwean people deported from the UK in return for something. Yeah. And that was in 2018, and we highlighted that. I think in July we had a demonstration in Sheffield about that. And yeah, we saw the consequence in December when Zimbabwean people, including members of SYMAAG as well, were called to the Home Office to report, which itself is a very stressful thing. People talk about losing sleep for 2 days before then, because maybe you'll go in and you won't come out, you'll go to a detention centre. But on that occasion in December, and again in January, a member of the Zimbabwean embassy was there, so a representative of the very government that people have fled from. And they were invited by the Home Office admitted that, to question and interrogate those people seeking asylum from them. So that itself must have caused unimaginable stress to people. I can't really believe how you would feel that. I can't imagine how you would feel that. But certainly it would cause you massive stress.
I would also want to say I can't imagine why our government here would think that that's okay, you know? The trauma of it all. Before we speak a lot more about the campaign, we'll talk about that in the next half. Victor, what was your experience with this particular situation?
The interview of Zimbabwean nationals, refused asylum seekers, well, it wasn't a good experience. I was one of the first people to be interviewed by a Zimbabwean embassy official who had come to the reporting center at Vulcan House here in Sheffield. And he asked me a few questions, which I refused to answer, because I told him straight on that I did not support the government that he represented. And then he switched on to speaking in Shona, which is my vernacular language. And then we started talking in Shona for about a minute or so. And then he went on to say that despite the fact that I'd refused to answer his questions, he had established that I'm truly a Zimbabwean. And even though I did not give him the details that he wanted, he said that he had all the information about me in front of him because he had a thick file folder about my situation in front of him. And
do you know where this was from? Was it from the Home Office or was it coming from the Zimbabwean government?
Obviously, the file must have been from the Home Office because these interviews were being done in Home Office premises.
So talking of that, though, I think, sorry there, but I was the one who was covering the story. I can remember covering the story very well when that happened. But if I can just bring you back to the allegation about the deal between the Home Office and the Zimbabwean government, Stuart. I once confronted the Home Office, and the answer I was given was that they do conduct routine interviews with different nationals, and whether you are from Zimbabwe or from any other country, that they, as the Home Office, the authority of this country, they are allowed to bring officials from that country to establish whether the person that claims to be they are from this country or from that country, to establish whether they are right that they are from that country. That's one. Secondly, that failed asylum seekers had no right to be here. So if they are trying to deport them, officials from those countries always try to stop them from being deported by claiming that they are not from those countries. So what they were trying to do is to establish those people that were particularly invited to the Home Office. They were trying to establish whether they are Zimbabwean nationals or not. So my question here is, in terms of the deal that has just been mentioned, is there any proof to that?
Look at what the ex-ambassador to Zimbabwe from the UK, Mr. Donnelly, said in a letter to The Guardian in summer 2018. Read that. I'll summarise it for you. He says there's, and I quote, a disgusting conspiracy going on between the UK government and the Zimbabwean military dictatorship. Now, that's an ex-UK ambassador. That's not an activist speaking. There was going to be a deal between the two governments. We don't know the details.
Is that the previous?
The previous? It's a previous ambassador, yeah.
Okay, but this deal, is it with the current government of Mnangagwa, or it was the previous government of like Mugabe?
It was with the current government.
Okay.
Can I add on to that a little bit? You're quite right. All governments have got the right to determine who is in the country, and in this country they do what are called redocumentation exercises, which the Home Office is entitled to do. But the redocumentation exercises are routine exercises that are done within certain limits, where they've got to establish the identity of that individual. My problem with that was, why would the Zimbabwean official have a thick folder about because he actually mentioned it to me that he knows the circumstances of my situation, which means he went beyond the limit of redocumentation, because 2 weeks later, or that was in December, 2 months later, that's when we were then summoned to the Home Office and were told that we were being detained with a view to be deported. That's one thing. So my question is, at what stage did the Home Office provide information that was merely for redocumentation, or did this person go deeper than the redocumentation exercise allows in order to get information about me? Because
we'll pick that up when we come back. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this segment, so thank you. We'll pick that up in the next segment, which we're starting in a few minutes. Thank you.